Welcome back to Project Management for Small Business. Starting back with John Lee Dumas. I'm so excited about this. Or JLD, as everybody affectionately knows him, is the host of Entrepreneurs on Fire, an award-winning podcast where he interviews inspiring entrepreneurs who are truly on fire. With over 2,000 episodes, 1 million plus listeners a month, and 7 figures of annual income, JLD is just getting started. You need to visit eofire.com to set your entrepreneurial journey on fire. Make sure you listen to his podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire. Listening to JLD's podcast gave me the courage to start this podcast. Hopefully, you'll get a great deal of value bombs, as he calls them, dropping from JLD today, encouraging you to follow your dream. Let's get started. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you being here, JLD. I really, really do. I think it's great. And I just really want to kind of, my podcast is all about project management and kind of what entrepreneurs struggle with, what they go through, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And I also kind of, with you, I want to find out how you think that they can actually use entrepreneurs' podcasts for their business when they don't want to do what you've done and you've made it your business, which has been awesome, and you've helped a lot of people, and just go from there.
Let's do it, brother.
So, to start out with, I want to find out from you how you got into making your business podcasting. I've read some things about it. I've saw it online, but just how did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
So it started off as a consumer. I was just a listener of podcasts. I loved the medium because I just understood the value of free, consistent, and valuable content. Like, I got it. A light bulb went off. And this is back in 2010, 2011, when there just wasn't that many podcasts out there and it wasn't really mainstream. And I remember looking for what I considered the perfect podcast, which was a daily podcast interviewing successful entrepreneurs. And that show did not exist. And that's when I was like, if I want this show, other people probably would as well. Why not create the first ever daily podcast interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs? So that led to the launch of Entrepreneurs on Fire in 2012. And here you and I are speaking 7 years later, 2,200 episodes later, $20 million in revenue later, saying, this was a pretty good niche to fill. Now what can I keep doing to take things to the next level?
What are you planning on doing for the next level? I know you keep pulling out new adventures and you've changed your podcast format, which has been great. And I listen to every episode now. I do not have time to go back and listen to the 2,000 episodes you have. I have gone through and looked at, the topics, and I've pulled out a lot of them, but what are you planning on doing next?
It's a good question. And the honest answer is, I don't know. And it will always be the answer because that's how I live my life. I live my life in 100-day sprints. I love to set up a massive goal that can be accomplished in 100 days. And then I accomplish that. And then I look around and I say, what's changed in the world? What's changed with me? Like, I may have different desires and goals and aspirations in 100 days than I have right now. And that's often happens. So the landscape will be different. I will be different in 100 days. So for me, planning any further than that is just a folly. It worked for some people, doesn't work for me. So right now, I'm just enjoying what I got going on with my podcast and my community, Podcasters Paradise, and some other projects that I'm working on. But beyond those things, like, I don't really know what's going to happen in 100 days from now, and I like it that way.
That's actually pretty good. 100 days. Too many people try to plan out a year to 5 years, especially when you start out. You can't necessarily plan out that far. But I've never heard anybody say that they only plan 100 days.
Well, those people haven't purchased my Freedom Journal, and it's too bad for them.
You know what? That is actually on my list. It's one of the things
Nice.
that I've got on my list to do. I've got so many things. I mean, the podcast I've started just a few months ago. I've got so many next steps that I want to take, and I think maybe that should be my next step is the Freedom Journal, because the 100 days sounds a lot better than me trying to figure out what I want to do next year at this time.
Nice.
But so what would be a piece of advice you would give to somebody that wants to do a podcast, but not necessarily make it their business like you, and how to incorporate it into their business?
It needs to be micro niche, and you need to find a micro topic that you're passionate about, that you're fired up about, but then you can also add value to the world. So what is that thing that you love that's kind of like a little niche, a little hobby, something that you're just really into? Do that thing. Do you know that like 7 of the top 20 podcasts right now in the world are Game of Thrones podcasts? Just talking about Game of Thrones.
That I can actually believe.
What is that thing that you have a passion on? Create that podcast. Start your own micro movement in that thing and have fun doing it. It doesn't have to be your full-time thing. It can be a side hustle where once a week you're just flipping on a microphone and you're just going to town on a topic that you're passionate about. Start there, see where it goes.
So for the 100 days, how often do you actually revisit that 100 days? Do you just do it at the end of the 100 days? Do you do it monthly? It's kind of an interesting thing, because if you're planning just for 100 days out, how often do you revisit that plan?
At the end of the 100 days, I will have accomplished that goal that I set out to, and the landscape will be different. Meaning, like, now that I've accomplished this goal, I'm in a different place in my business. I'm in a different place as a human being. So I look around and say, okay, now what are my new goals and my new aspirations? What does the world look like today that it didn't look like 100 days ago? 100 days in today's day and time is a lot of time. It's a lot of things are happening. Companies are being bought. Niches are being created. Fads are coming and going. Like, it's crazy. You know, I mean, the China tariffs, the stock market potentially going to be crashing, Bitcoin doubling. You just never know what it's going to look like in 100 days. And so I just reassess.
Technology changes in that time period.
It's true.
New technology. So for all these things that you're doing, projects every 100 days, how do you keep track of it all? I mean,
in the Freedom Journal.
You keep track of everything in your Freedom Journal.
Everything.
So you go back to that, and that's how you track your projects, your status,
Because the Freedom Journal is set up with daily activities, nightly recaps. Every 10 days, you're doing a 10-day sprint to get 10% closer to your 100% goal in 100 days. Every 25 days, you're doing a quarterly review, looking back over what worked, what didn't. And then by the time you're at day 100, you'll have accomplished your number one goal.
How do you... And I'm sure this is all going to be in the Freedom Journal, because it sounds like that's a lot different than what I expected it to be. I've looked at it. How do you actually know how much you can accomplish in that 100 days?
You don't.
How do you decide?
You don't. You need to start off by just throwing a dart at a dartboard and just saying, you know what? I'm going to set a SMART goal. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And again, in the Freedom Journal, as you kind of alluded to, you were correct there, we teach you how to set that SMART goal. And the key word that I mentioned, that you were questioning, is attainable. You learn how to actually have an attainable goal in those 100 days. So over those 100 days, that SMART goal, that specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goal, you'll see what happens in those 100 days. Maybe you accomplish it in 46 days. Now you know you didn't set your goal big enough. And now for Freedom Journal number 2, you go and you set a bigger goal until you really figure out, okay, this is really what I'm capable of doing in 100 days to really make a difference in my life.
So what did you do before you created the Freedom Journal? How did you do all this?
I don't remember. That was 4 years ago. Those were really dark days. And you did a really bad job keeping your dog out of the room. I can see him right behind you.
Well, that's the Chihuahua. He's quiet.
Oh, okay.
The puppy is it's a 6-month-old boxer and lab, and
nice.
He would be up in my lap, and he's 50 pounds, and that would be even worse. Yeah. So I kept him in here so that he wouldn't be chased by the other dog.
Got it.
For now. So I have listened to, like I said, a lot of your podcast. I've taken advice from a lot of your guests. How do you choose which guests that you think are going to provide the relevant information for your listeners, for your Fire Nation, which I love that title?
Thank you. We have a very thorough application. We get over 400 requests per month of people wanting to be on our show. And so I have a very thorough application process. So even before it gets to me, people have been vetted to a level where every one of them will probably make a good guess, but there's still obviously not enough spots on my show for all of the applicants. And we just go from there. And I just kind of say, you know what, this is what I really think my audience needs right now, content-wise. Let's go in this direction.
Because I took advice from one of your shows to start getting some more guests and finding people, and I actually went on Help a Reporter Out, and you said you did it in the beginning to get started with your podcasts.
I still have a Gmail folder that just is titled Harrow that has like 500 emails from that one email I sent out on Harrow, and I was just like, whoa, that's a lot of people. I haven't even been able to go through all of them because I've never needed to.
Yeah, I actually ended up with just over 100 between the one post I put out, which was great. And you're right; it's been kind of difficult to go through them all and figure out which ones would be the best, because some of them aren't applicable.
Yeah, that's why you need to be much more specific in your Harrow post if you ever do it again.
Yeah. So what are, I know you also, some of the things you said about you've reduced your speaking engagements because of so much time that you have. What do you want to do with your speaking engagements? What kind of things do you like to do to keep up with?
Number one, I really like to be teaching tactical information. I think a lot of people get up and speak and they're motivational and they're inspirational and they're hoorah and they're rah-rah and they're woo-woo. And listen, nothing's wrong with that. People need motivation. They need inspiration. But then unfortunately, Monday comes and they're back to work and that motivation kind of fades away. My goal when I'm on stage and I'm the keynote speaker at an event, which I just was a couple months ago at PodFest in Orlando, is you will leave my presentation with tactics, with tools, with a step-by-step process to succeed at a specific area in your entrepreneurial life. That's why I speak.
I have listened to you, like I said, on your podcast, and the one thing that the advice you've always given on your webinars, everything is to bring your authentic self, and I think you actually do that. I think you can be inspirational, obviously, because you've inspired me to do my podcast, but I also think that I don't get that feel from you that you offer a get-rich-quick scheme.
I don't believe in get rich quick. I mean, I've studied a lot of successful entrepreneurs, and every time you hear an overnight success, you look a little deeper and you see that was 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the making. Anybody that gets rich quick typically has gotten there through winning the lottery or by some absolute fluke of nature. And oftentimes you check in with them a year later and they are no longer rich. In fact, they're probably worse off than they were when they initially, had that windfall of revenue, money that came in the door. So for me, it's all about hard work. It's all about consistency. I love the phrase delayed gratification. If you want to succeed in life, you got to be willing to delay your gratification. You've got to be willing to make things happen. I believe that with health. I like to fast. I delay my gratification when it comes to eating. Why am I within 2 or 3 pounds of my ideal body weight? Is because I don't feel the need to eat every 3 hours like 99% of Americans that are overweight, eating every 3 or 4 hours. I go 24, 36, 40 hours without eating any food. I delay my gratification. And when I do eat, I love it and I enjoy it and I'm hungry. But my body now has had 40 hours of straight fasting to heal itself, to detox, to not just always be digesting food like most overweight Americans are. And that's just one small example of why delayed gratification works in health and wellness. It also works in the same way in business. You got to plant seeds in business that aren't going to bloom for a year, 3 years, 5 years down the road. Like there are things right now in 2019 that are starting to bloom that I planted back in 2014, 2015.
That's great advice, because too many people, that's what entrepreneurs expect. They expect to go in and be successful in the first month or two or the first year, and it doesn't happen. And
let me qualify your statement. Unsuccessful entrepreneurs go in that.
There you go. Thank you very much. Okay.
So we got about 1 minute left. What do you got for me, brother?
I was just going to ask you for this last minute, what would your final piece of advice be to anybody that's starting out new, and how to tie it into
Sure.
being successful?
It's a quote by Albert Einstein. Try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. If you can just focus on adding value to the world, success is going to come. Find your micro topic, find your micro niche, add value in that, and then success is going to come to you. That's where your focus should be, adding value. And, I try to add value all the time on my podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire. I'd love if people check that out. And of course, we have a lot of cool free stuff over at eofire.com.
And I will definitely put all that stuff in the notes. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to find out more? What's the best way?
eofire.com.
Just find that out. Okay, I appreciate it, JLD. It's been great. Some great information. Take care.
Take care, brother.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Project Management for Small Business. If you want to be on the podcast, or if you have a question you'd like answered on the podcast, please go ahead and get in touch at pmforsb@pavproconsulting.com. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'd love for you to leave a review if you like what you hear. And I'm very happy and proud to be one of FeedSpot's top 15 project management audio podcasts. Check out the link that's listed in this episode. And until next time, thanks for listening.